now that you've constructed your shell in Illustrator, and again, I just want to reiterate the reason we're doing the shell is because on my box design here, I have photography in here, and Illustrator perspective really doesn't do well with photography. If your design is strictly graphics and vectors, you could go ahead and build this in Illustrator with your actual artwork on it. But I think for most of you, you're going to want to probably use a shell on here. And so once you do this, now what we're going to do is we're going to switch into Photoshop. So I'm going to come down here and open Photoshop. What you want to do is create an 1117 file on here. So do new in Photoshop. You want to do in inches, do 11 by 17 tabloid. Make sure your work RGB. The reason for that, I always work in RGB because you have a lot more effects and filters available to you. A lot of them don't work in CMYK, so I would go ahead and change that to RGB. Go ahead and hit create here. Oh, did it the wrong size. Can't believe that. Let's try that again. Inches, width 17, 11, 300, and then we're going to go back into RGB here. So now we're in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is flip between Illustrator and Photoshop and import these piece by piece. So let's go back to Illustrator. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and grab my front panel here, and I'm going to copy it. I'm using key commands, Command C, or you can just come up here and copy it. Now I'm going to switch into Photoshop, and now I'm going to just paste this in here. You want to make sure you paste this in as pixels. So there's the front part of my box. Now we may make these larger in here to fill up the frame a little bit more, but let's wait and get all the pieces in there, because you want to make sure everything sizes up at the exact same percentage. And if you do it piece by piece, it might be off a little bit. So go ahead and place that, hit the return key to lock that in. We can always go over here on this layer and call it the front. Now I'm going to go back to Illustrator and grab the side panel here, and I'm going to copy it and then come into Photoshop, paste this as well as pixels. Always paste these as pixels. Don't worry right now if they don't line up. We're going to line everything up here in a second. And then finally I'm going to go back to Illustrator and grab the shadow here and copy that and go back into Photoshop and go ahead and paste that in as well. I didn't copy it. Let's try that again. Go back into Photoshop, paste it in as pixels. Go ahead and hit return. So all of these should be proportionate. So I'm going to zoom in here and line things up. So let's go ahead, since we started labeling these. This will be my side panel. This is going to be my shadow. I can't spell today. There we go. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line these things up. So I'm going to take my shadow, line it right up on the point here, and I'm going to drop it behind everything else in my layers panel. Now I'm going to go to my side panel here, go ahead and line this up as well. Get it as close as you can. But the beauty of this, you can always come back and adjust this if you need to. One thing I'm going to do before I actually put my artwork in here, a couple things. First of all, I'm going to select all three panels here by selecting one layer, hold the shift key down, and then you can select all of these. That will allow you to size this up and make it a little larger in the frame. You can reposition it if you want to as well. The last thing I'm going to do on here before we start importing artwork in here is I'm going to come over here to my shadow, and I'm actually going to skew it a little bit so we see a little bit of a shadow on this side. So if you come up here under transform, I'm going to come over here to skew, and I'm just going to shift this and rotate it over a little bit. I just want to see a little bit of the shadow down here. Now, when you do that, you might have to come down here and adjust everything. Nope, looks pretty good. I just want to see a little bit of the shadow on this edge. It's going to make it look a little bit more realistic. So once you have all these pieces together in Photoshop, now what we can do is we can work on placing your actual designs in here. And one of the things you can do, I'm going to go back to Illustrator here and go back to my template demo. And I just want to make sure that was saved. You can actually open this up in Photoshop. So I'm in Photoshop right now. I'm going to come up here and do open. And I'm going to find my demos. Let's see here. Where is my template demo? So even though this is an Illustrator file, you can go ahead and open it in Photoshop. So if I go ahead and hit open, it's going to ask you how you want to open it up here. Now it's a really big file because the template's pretty large on there. The important thing is you want this to be in 300%. You also want to make sure it's going to be in color as well on here. So you want our template here that we're building is in 300 pixels per inch or dots per inch DPI. Make sure you do the same here and go ahead and hit OK. And now here is my template, but we're in Photoshop. And the way we're going to do this, I'm going to come up here and select my front panel. I'm going to use the marquee tool and come up here and just select my front panel. And I'm going to come over here and copy that. Now I'm going to go back to this Photoshop template or kind of structure I've built here. We're going to paste this artwork into this panel. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's put these in order. So I have front on top, side panel, shadow here. What you want to do is select the layer with the front panel on there. And then what you want to do is on your keyboard, hold the command key down and click this panel. And what that will do, it will turn the panel we have in here into a selection. All right. Now remember, I copied my front artwork and it's out there floating in the ether right now. So I'm going to paste this into the selection I just made. So come up here under Edit. You want to come here to Paste Special. And you want to come down here, Paste Into. And when you do that, you can see what it did is it pasted the artwork into my front panel. Now, obviously, it's really off right now, but we're going to fix that. And the way we're going to do it, and here's the deal. Photoshop has perspective function in it, but it's really kind of wonky. So that's why we haven't been using it. It tends to distort everything. We're going to do an approximation of perspective here. So here you can see now I have a new layer with my front artwork on it. You can call that front artwork if you want. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this fit in the space. So if I select this artwork, and you'll notice here what happened is when I pasted it in, if you look over in your layer over here, because I pasted it into that selection, it has created a mask for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to distort this image so it fits in here. You have to make sure there isn't a lock on here. If you have this lock icon on here, as I distort the artwork, it's going to also distort my mask here. So make sure that's turned off. Now what you want to do, make sure you're selected on the artwork. Come up here under Edit. Come to Transform, and what you want to do is don't go to perspective. Like I said, Photoshop perspective is really not all that great. What I do is go to Distort, and when you do that, you're going to see it's given me handles on all four corners of my artwork, and what I'm going to do is drag each of these corners into place, and as I do this, I'm just kind of roughing it in here. Now I'm going to zoom in here and make this as close as I can. So I'm going to kind of line this point up here. And I'm going to line this point up as well. And get the bottom. That one actually looks pretty good. And then I'll do this. And once you get that pretty much placed the way you want it, you can go ahead and hit the return key on your keyboard, and that will lock your front panel artwork in here. Now you still have the front shape that we used down here. You can turn that off now because we were just using that for placement. Now let's go back and we'll do the side panel on here. So I'm going to go back to, again, this is my template, my Illustrator file, but I've opened it in Photoshop at 300 dpi. So I'm going to use the marquee tool. Now I'm going to grab this side panel. Now, you don't have to use the panel, the side panel that has the nutrition label on it. I just did this for illustrative purposes here. I've just got Greek text in here right now. And now I'm going to go ahead and copy this and go back to the render that I'm creating here. Select the layer that has the side panel on it, and then what you want to do is hold the Command key down on your keyboard and click it again. That's going to turn it into a selection, and we're going to do the exact same thing on this that we did on the front panel. Come up here. Now remember, I copied that side panel. It's floating out in space right now. So if you come down here, paste special, paste into, it's going to do the same thing that we did before. So you can see here, here's my original panel. We can turn that off now. Actually, I'll leave it on until we place this. Here's my side panel artwork, and you can see the mask that it made of that selection. Again, make sure that the link here is unchecked, that this isn't linked, because otherwise you're going to distort your mask on here. So make sure you've selected the artwork. Come up here under Edit, Transform to Distort, and I'm going to do the same things. I'm just going to very roughly grab my corners just to get them roughly in position here, and then I'll zoom in and make it a little bit more accurate. Now, is this true perspective? No, it's close enough. We'll put it that way. Now, if you use dimensions for this, you will get really true perspective on here. But to be honest with you, this is going to be so close, no one is going to notice on here, so I wouldn't worry about it. And I've got these all kind of placed exactly. And once we have that placed, you can go ahead and hit return to lock it in. And again, if you want to, we only use these Illustrator shapes as our kind of skeleton to build this on. You can turn those off. So now I've got the front panel here, I've got the side panel, and in the next video what we're going to do is talk about how you can use lighting and shadow to really make this look realistic.